Don't you think it's funny that they're this super British brand and they are the English brothers? I mean, their surname is literally English. I mean, it's almost like they changed their name by default just to be more on brand. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Simon and I mostly talk about watches. And today I wanted to talk about BREMONT, and in particular why, with the recent unveiling of their new brand identity and a completely new model line, I'm genuinely worried for the future of their brand. So the dust has just about settled after Watches and Wonders 2024. And I think most people have probably already forgotten about most of the new releases. I mean, look, to use a wine analogy, it wasn't exactly what you'd call a vintage year. But the one thing that I think people are still talking about is BREMONT. Now, it's a huge achievement that they seem to have united the whole of the watch community behind a hatred of this new brand identity that they've unveiled. And perhaps to a lesser extent, the new range of field watches that they just released. Of course, you're only going to see these discussions on social media and in the forums. I mean, the watch media seems to have had nothing but good things to say about it. But I guess that people like Waco aren't going to bite the hand that feeds them. I know I probably won't be getting any invites to collaborate with BREMONT after this video. So for those of you who don't know much about the brand, just to give you a very quick potted history, BREMONT was formed in the early 2000s by two brothers, Nick and Giles English, who wanted to bring their love of aviation and classic cars to the world of watches. They also had a dream to produce their own British movement, but we'll come back to that later. So Nick and Giles spent a long time trying to position BREMONT as, I guess what you'd call the quintessential British watch brand. For example, here's a photo of Nick and Giles in front of a British motoring icon, the Land Rover. And here again, there's one in front of an E-Type Jaguar. And I'm sure that I saw a picture of them in front of a Spitfire too. I bet their PR team was constantly on the phone to Buckingham Palace to see if the late Queen Elizabeth was ever free for a photo shoot. At least they stopped short of having themselves photographed being, I don't know, wrapped in a Union Jack. Oh, wait. Now, I haven't had much hands-on experience with their watches. I mean, some of the designs were nice enough, but I found many of them to be kind of quite generic and iterative. They've had a few really incredible pieces, like the Martin Bakers. So Martin Baker is a British manufacturer of ejection seats. I think they supply about 70% of the world's air forces. And BREMONT formed a partnership with them, which led to a series of watches that were apparently tested to withstand the same G-forces as you would experience from being ejected from a fighter plane. I think that's pretty cool. Now, the first one, imaginatively named the MB1, was only made available to people who had ejected from a plane, though they must have fairly quickly realised that this was going to be a pretty small target market, so following editions were made available to anybody. Some of the recent models in the Supermarine collection are really nice. I particularly like that one that uses the same colour palette as the Omega Seamaster No Time to Die. Then they released the Supernova, which is their version of an integrated bracelet steel sports watch. Now, I really like the design of these, but the full retail price is about £8,000 or $10,000. And at that price point, you've got an awful lot of choice. This is the first model to use their ENG 300 in-house movement. Now, this is a good movement, and BREMONT invested heavily trying to bring their ambition to make a British-made movement to life. They got a lot of flack, though, unfairly so in my opinion, because the movement wasn't developed in-house and is actually based on the K1 movement from independent Swiss brand Orage. But whether I like the watches or not, clearly quite a lot of people do. And in 2018, their turnover hit about £25 million. It's dropped a little since, but I think it's still hovering around the 20 million mark. Their profitability, however, well, that's a completely different story. The business hasn't actually made a profit since 2015, and between 2015 and 2023, their combined losses total over £11 million. Clearly, behind the scenes, things aren't quite working. And in January 2022, they opened a flagship boutique in Shanghai, China. Now, China has been a huge growth market for many of the luxury watch brands, but that same boutique closed its doors just 12 months later, disappeared completely off the online store locator. Then in January 2023, Nick & Giles English accepted an investment of just over £48 million, around $60 million, from Hellcat Acquisitions LP. Now that's a US investment fund owned by American billionaire Bill Ackman, who also has significant investments in Domino's, Disney, Netflix, and Hilton Hotels. Now, Mr. Ackman clearly didn't have the confidence in Nick & Giles to be able to turn the business around. Or perhaps he just wanted a big name from the watch industry at BREMONT's helm. But either way, in May 2023, Davide Cerato was appointed as BREMONT's CEO. Davide has an impressive CV, having previously held senior positions at Montblanc, at Panerai, and of course at Tudor, where he's credited as being one of the team that launched the hugely successful Black Bay line. Now, after being appointed, Davide gave several interviews where he stated that what he felt Bremont really needed was a new and more affordable product line, with watches priced around £2,500. Fast forward to Watches and Wonders 2024, and just a couple of weeks ago, Bremont unveiled a new affordable collection of field watches. Bremont is clearly trying to broaden its associations from just aviation. They're now talking about land, air, and sea. And to reinforce this, they've also dropped the old logo in favour of a shiny new one. And this hasn't gone down well in the watch community. Now, starting with the branding, because that's probably the area where I've got most expertise. So I spent about 25 years as a branding and marketing consultant. It's clearly intended to resemble a compass rose or a wayfinder, which fits the new narrative. But where the old logo was classy and elegant and distinctive, this new logo, together with the fonts that they've used, is the complete opposite. I don't know about you, but to me it feels clumsy and just like something we've seen a million times before. You could also say the same thing about the new watches too, the Terra Nova series as they're calling it. The cushion-shaped cases are really nice, but the bezels and the dials just look cluttered and busy, and those chunky fonts just take up a lot of space. In fact, there's barely any space on the dial where they haven't put something in it. It's like every designer's worst nightmare, where the client sees an area of negative space and immediately wants to put something in it, or wants to make their logo bigger. And that's exactly what you've got here. The logo is just way too big on the dial, in my opinion, and far too close to the indices at the 12 o'clock position. And then beneath the pinion, you've got 3 lines of text in that god-awful font. And then there's the price of these watches. So this new collection was trailed as being priced at around £2,500. But there's actually only one 3-hand watch at that price point. And if you want it on a bracelet, well, that's going to be almost £3,000. And if you want the chronograph on a bracelet, well, that one's nearer £5,000. And these aren't using the in-house movement either. They're all powered by Solita or ETA-based calibers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but at £3,000 or even £5,000, then the rest of the watch needs to be something really special. I'm just really struggling to see the thinking behind all of this. I mean, the company's revenues have been growing pretty consistently year on year, So while I might not have thought that their existing models offered the best value, clearly they were able to sell them, at least to their authorized dealers anyway. And in theory at least, selling cheaper watches is going to make you less margin, which means less profit for selling the same number of units. Unless, of course, you find a way to make a cheaper product, but with a higher percentage profit margin. And that's what I think that they might have done here. I mean, while there are some nice touches, like the use of solid loomed indices or 904L stainless steel, generally speaking, these are not expensive watches to make. And while the entry point to the new collection is £2,500, most of the watches are priced significantly higher than that. Now, I'm no financial advisor, but I have run my own businesses, and as an outsider looking in, albeit with very limited information, it just feels to me that BREMONT are looking for solutions in all of the wrong places. And I actually think that the roots of their financial problems may well lie in their costs and in their overheads. I mean, look, they've got this hugely futuristic headquarters that must have cost them millions. And I'm sure that BREMONT doesn't want my advice, but I wouldn't have changed the logo. I think they've done it because they clearly wanted to be seen to be making a step change. But to me, it feels like a lack of confidence, perhaps almost a sense of panic, much more so even than just Davide Chirato wanting to make his own mark. And big luxury brands don't usually make such big, sweeping, radical changes. I mean, just look at Rolex, for example. You know, we all mock them for making these small, incremental steps. But BREMONT, by comparison, has, well, to use an old expression, they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. But guys, those are just my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours, so please do drop me a comment down below. And Davide, if you're watching this, then I could be available for a small consultancy fee.